It was on a Saturday morning. I was scrolling through some old pictures and found a picture of my childhood. I took the picture and held it up in front of my face. As I look in the mirror, some of the old memories began to form in my head. But I'm wondering, how am I sure I'm the kid in that picture? We do not have the same physical properties, and our ideas, thoughts, and beliefs are different, and we certainly don't have the same memories. But immediately I saw the picture. I knew this is me. My brain saw the picture and created a story that I was there, but currently I am here, and I will be elsewhere in the future, looking back and doing the same thing. This is called the idea of self. The idea that there's something deep inside of us that essentially remains the same even if everything else changes. It is the idea that we can create new memories or lose old memories. We can change thoughts and beliefs, and we grow during the process. But deep down there is always something fundamentally unchanged. The idea of self is what baffles scientists and philosophers for centuries, because as easy as it is to describe, understanding why or how it works is another thing. As humans, we experience many different senses. We hear things, we feel things, and we see things. We also have thoughts, we have feelings, and we have the ability to learn new things, but all of these feelings are different experiences. So at what point do all of these combine to become you? As I kept scrolling through the pictures, I came across pictures of elementary school, middle school, high school, and everything after that. All these photos look different. Looking back on that time and the decisions I made, I would never have made most of them if it was now. But however, beyond a shadow of a doubt, my brain still convinces me that I was still me. The words I and me are not just pronouns. They are two ways we describe self. When we say I, we are talking about a being that is aware of the present moment. For example, I'm reading this from a script now. On the other hand, when we describe ourselves with the word me, we usually refer to an individual identity, who we think we are, and we often reflect on who we are through the lens of the past, present, and plans for the future. But if we focus our memories according to what we need in the present and our plans for the future, and we are constantly changing. How can a consistent entity exist if everything that constitutes it changes? We like to think of memories as simply replaying a video in our heads of what happened in past, but that is not memory. Memory is the reconstruction of our brain's experience. We create these memories to fit the current story based on what we know now, how we describe me now, as well as our current needs and goals. So, if you think of yourself as a nice person, it means you're more likely to remember only the times you were nice to people, and not the time when you were mean. We form stories about ourselves around how we want to be seen by others. We convince ourselves that we will act and behave in a certain way to fit that story, even when we are often wrong. If this is true, and we cannot trust our memories to accurately describe who we are in the past, then how can we have a self that exists through time? Or are we creating new selves every time the story completely changes? Think about it. The story didn't continue on a different path. It changes completely in a way that what was no longer is. And if that is possible, then one cannot say that there is a self that lasts forever. In contrast, the idea of self is an idea that our brains are constantly reproducing when the need arises. This is what we call self-delusion, contrary to what you might think. That doesn't mean we don't have a self. It just means it doesn't exist as we think it does. Our bodies are made up of a group of perceptions, feelings, and thoughts. You are there. Now you are here. It is the kind of history that we describe as severe. It's just the brain's way of understanding the randomness of human existence. This is why the idea of self we have now can't be true. Most people think of a self as something that can exist outside of the brain. That cannot be true. The self is a sense of continuity and unity that is created by the brain. Without self-awareness, there is no self. Human beings are nothing more than a collection of molecules, and anything else that is believed about them is simply a wishful thinking. The idea is that deep down inside, we have a soul, a non-material entity, the driving force of individual existence. And in most religions of the world, this is true except in Buddhism. The Buddhist doctrine of anatta teaches that there is no self or permanence in the world. There is no soul. Everything we experience is simply perceived by our senses, without any involvement from I or me. But there are two major problems with this school of thought. We can't simply rely on people's personal experiences to determine what is what. The feeling of emptiness is a mental process that occurs when something is missing, or when we are detached from something. This in itself means that your brain is telling you that you are thought-free. Although we may not be able to see or feel our brain waves, they are still happening. Some people argue that if there is no I, then how can we trust anyone else's judgment? If a ghost emerged today and said that ghosts don't exist, how do we believe them? To be able to make judgments about consciousness, you need to be an objective observer. Being an objective observer means you must have a self who is impartial and open to all information, like you are a god or something. Almost every argument you might make in favor of your position is negated by the fact that negation almost always negates whatever it is that it is negating. But actually, the hallucination of the ego is more than just a ghost telling us that there are no ghosts. There is a figure that we call a ghost who tells us that they can feel, touch, and smell. But since ghosts cannot interact with living things, they cannot be ghosts. This is not just a postulation of the absence of I. The fact that climate change is happening is shown through the results of scientific research. There is no need for a self to tell us there is no self. We don't need any additional evidence. As I look at the photograph of me when I was a kid, the evidence is clear. It is clear that everything has changed dramatically. I know I share some ancestry with the child pictured, but there is no concrete evidence to support the idea that something from that child still exists within me that has persisted over time. At this point, I was having an existential crisis, so I picked up pictures of my grandma to help me feel connected to someone close to me. She's now much older than she was when she was in the picture. What about people who are in their 80s or 90s and have Alzheimer's disease? People who can't recognize their loved ones, who can't remember anything from their past, likely to be suffering from dementia. Do they still have a self? When does a person stop being himself? What am I if I have no memories of the past or plans for the future? What is the meaning of the word self, if the very components that make up the self can be easily changed or completely destroyed? Then, the idea of a permanent self through time is not impossible. The idea of self can be a hindrance when trying to understand why people act unexpectedly. We often judge people by the memories we have of them. The idea that no self exists through time explains why we sometimes act in ways that are inconsistent with the story we tell ourselves and to others. The truth is that self-deception is simply a collection of our memories of the past, our desires in the present, and our plans for the future. It is not an external supernatural force that exists independently, is what makes us who we are. It doesn't transit through death, and it doesn't transit through time. We were not and we will not be. We are simply here.
Another mystery.
The only way I know I exist